The answer past profound and wonderful Dharma is difficulty encountering billions of aeons. I now see it, here, receive and uphold it, vow to fathom the Tathagata's true meaning, to liberate all beings. Let's generate the supreme Bodhicitta. At the time of supplicating the Guru, we should be respectful and have this mind of veneration. We should silently supplicate the teacher, the Guru, and the Buddha. This is really a reminder to all of you before the actual class. Before the actual class, we would make aspiration for bodhicitta. We are listening to this class to benefit all beings. We need to contemplate that. At the time of making the dedication of merit, you need to contemplate that today all of the merits that I've received and gained through the study of this sutra or shastra, I am rededicating this merit to all the sentient beings of the three realms, the three existence. At the time of having this particular type of contemplation is really not difficult if you're accustomed to it. But since we're mundane beings, without reminders, you might forget about it. But once you get more accustomed to it and habituate yourself with this, then you should be able to do it at all times. The ones with a sharp capacity would be able to do it at all times, and the ones with middling capacities will be able to make such aspiration and dedication through reminders, and the ones of lower capacities won't be able to do it anyways. Anyhow, now let's continue with the Shurangama Sutra. Previously, we have already talked about how the Buddha told Ananda that as someone who made the aspiration of bodhicitta and want to part ways from the lesser vehicle, then you should not get tired with the samadhi and then make aspiration for bodhicitta. These are the two types of resolves you need to have. And out of the first resolve, it is really saying that the aspiration should correspond with the causal ground as well as the fruition ground. The reason that we do not correspond to those two grounds is because the sentient beings do not see the true nature or true face of Tathagata and not truly understanding the five turbidities, the five layers of turbidities. There are the five layers of turbidities, including the turbidity of time, of life, of view of sentient beings, and of afflictions. Though the names and terminologies are the same as how we would usually address the five degenerations or the five turbidities, but the explanations over here are a bit different. Let us now continue with the explanation of the five turbidities. Out of the five turbidities, the Buddha first of all talks about the turbidity of time. Ananda, the Buddha says, you see that emptiness pervades the 10 directions. There is no division between emptiness and the seeing. However, although emptiness has no substance and your seeing has no awareness, the two become entangled in a falseness. This is the first layer, called the turbidity of time. Usually, whenever we talk about the turbidity of time or degeneration of kalpa, we would describe that there would be all kinds of warfare and with the degeneration of the merits of the sentient beings, where all kinds of calamities would appear. But over here, this is a bit different, because the Buddha told Ananda, saying that, look at the space, which is all-pervasive over the 10 directions. As we all know, that the seeing nature is often expressed through the example of space. So from the subject, which is wisdom aspect, the object is space. When you look at the space, which is all-pervasive over the 10 directions, your seeing is also all-pervasive over the 10 directions. But at the very beginning, it is not like that. Because whenever we talk about the very beginning, the first thought of ignorance, at the time that first thought of ignorance appears, that is the appearance of the turbidity of time. If the first thought of ignorance did not appear, then the seeing is just like space, which is all-pervasive. It is similar to the Vajrayana teaching. Before the ground and the manifestation of the ground separated, the basic ground is just like the space. It does not fall into any of the extremes. So over here it says that your view and space would be all-pervasive over the 10 directions. The emptiness and the space does not, or the space and view does not have any separations. The space does not have any extremes, nor does the view. Why is the space and view not separate? In fact, because the space has not been tinted by the 4 great elements. Same as the view has not been tinted by the 6 roots. Emptiness has no substance, and seeing has no awareness. The space does not have any substance, since it does not have any of the substance of the 4 great elements. And then the seeing does not have any awareness, comes from the 6 roots. It is not defiled by the 6 roots. Then our true nature, the Buddha nature, the wonderfully enlightened awakenment has not been separated. And then out of no reason there appears the ignorance, for example, the co-emergent ignorance and imputational ignorance. After they have this ignorance appears, there is the entanglement in falseness. That is to say, the space and the nature of mind, which is the basic ground alaya, entangles in falseness and becomes the false thought. After it becomes the false thought, it is the production of the first thought of ignorance. That would refer back to the example of how the water mixes with dust and then forms the turbidity of the water, because at first the water was clean and pure, was clear. It has nothing to do with turbidity, but after someone throw the dust into it, then there is the turbidity, and this is the first layer. It is called the turbidity of time. If we were to refer back to the skandhas, this is a skandha form. According to many commentaries, it points out that it can be cross-referenced or correlated rather to the skandha form, which means at the beginning, after the appearance of ignorance, there is the body and then the feelings, perception, thinking, and so on and so forth. After the first thought, after the first appearance of ignorance, there is the 12 nirdanas. After the appearance of the 5 skandhas of the body, then there is a name and form. It is to say that the external phenomena and the mind started to solidify, and that's how there's the slow manifestation of the turbidity of time or turbidity of kalpa. It is related to time. The very beginning of the 5 turbidities is the turbidity of kalpa. Why is it named for kalpa? Because at the very beginning of the kalpa, it is the perfection kalpa, and then slowly becomes the kalpa of turbidity. For the same reason, at the very beginning, the sentient beings are not separated from their Tathagata Garbha, their very well perfected, and then there is the manifestation of ignorance, and then slowly there appears the object and subject. So this is related to time, and that is why it is called the turbidity of time or turbidity of kalpa. Now the second turbidity out of the 5, your body appears in full with the 4 elements composing its substance, and from this, seeing, hearing, sensation, and cognition become firmly defined. Water, fire, wind, and earth fluctuate between sensation and cognition and become entangled in falseness. This is a second layer called the turbidity of views. Now the Buddha tells Ananda, saying that the body that you have, since the form skandha has already appeared, or you can say, in other words, you have this body which is composed by the 4 great elements. Since the 4 great elements, the earth, water, fire, and wind, composed this body.
那么这样的话呢，就是实际上我们的这个身体呢，就是加和四大这个加和以后的话呢，
After the 4 great elements formed this body, then there comes the seeing, hearing, sensation, and cognition. All of those would appear by relying on the 4 great elements. Relying on the 4 great elements, there comes the 6 roots, and then the seeing, hearing, sensation, and cognition. And after the seeing, hearing, cognition, and sensation, there is the obscuration. That is, for example, after the eyes sees the form, but the eyes cannot see surpass that of the form. Initially, the Tathagata, the Buddha nature, is of no obscuration. It can penetrate anywhere without any obscuration, but the eyes now can only see form but cannot hear sound. The ears can hear only the sound but cannot taste. Other than that, other than our own perceived objects, we will not be able to understand the others' perceived objects. And then the 4 great elements, the water, fire, wind, and earth, fluctuates between sensation and cognition and become entangled in a falseness. What does it mean by entangles with our cognition? It means that originally our awareness is as pure as space. There is no seeing, hearing, sensation, nor cognition. There is no such false conception. However, the 4 great elements would combine, would entangle with the cognition, which means, for example, whenever we have the sensation for water, it is moist, and earth, it is solid, and wind is of movement, and all of those kinds of sensations would connect and entangle and merge with our cognition. After such entanglement, then our cognition will take that as true. The 4 great elements being entangled with our physical body then creates all kinds of sensations. Let it be suffering sensations, or the joyful sensations, or the neutral sensations. This is called the turbidity of view, and to correspond to the 5 skandhas, this is corresponded to the skandha of feeling. It corresponds with the skandha of feeling. It is because the skandha of feeling would grasp onto an object. For the same reason, our mind, after being mixed with the 4 great elements, there is the obscuration, there is the obstacle
那个就是经论当中也是讲啊，就是说
Without
其实佛
such
陀的话呢，
obstacle
他的
in
这个
terms of
眼耳
our
鼻舌身
Buddha
这个六
nature,
根
it
就是
would
这个六
be
根
all
的话呢，它
pervasive.
不仅仅
According
是
to
比
some
如说
sutras and
眼睛不
shastras,
仅
it
是
states that
看得到这个
for
色
the
法，还要
Buddha,
听得到
the
这个
six
声音，
roots of
还
the
要这
Buddha
个
not
能
only
品尝，就是或者说是
the
这个
eye
让这
faculty
个
would
就
be
是
able
接
to
触
see the
或者
forms,
说是能
but
知
it
觉
could
其他的
also
这个对境呢，就是这
hear
样
the
的，包
sounds
括这个
and
富努马尊者
taste
的话呢，
or
他当时
touch
眼根就是已经
such
下来了，
textile
但是呢，他
sensations as
通过这
well,
个田野呢，就是也能看到就
including
是一切的这个
Venerable
设法，
Purna, though
一有
that
验
his
证呢，就是还要很好。
root,
如果
his
真正
eye
是除了眼
faculty
根以外，就是没有这样的
has
话呢，那其
been
他人即
blinded,
便
but
是
he
有如
would
来
be
藏，即便
able
是
to
有
see
信士
all
的话
kinds
呢，
of forms
也不
through
会
his
就是碰
divine
到
eye,
就是现在我
even
们
much better
很多
than
人呢，就是
those
包括这
with
个
the flesh eye.
就是
If it
就
is
是有
not
一些
that
小孩
the
啊，就
Buddha
是这
nature
个的
is
话呢，
all
它相当于
pervasive,
是有一种这
then
个天眼
without
通一
the
样，一
eye
般老人
faculty,
就
we
是
would not
就
be
是
able
大
to
人看不
perceive
到
the
的，就是好
forms.
多的这种这个对境的话呢，就是他也
Nowadays,
看得
many
到，
people,
包括一
including
些
young
贵司也
children,
好，包括很多的一些
sometimes it seems
现在
that
有
they
推
have
功能的很
the
多人的话呢，他就即
penetration
便
of the
是
divine
盲人，但
eye,
是他通过这个数
where
字的
they
感觉
are
呢，就是
able
也
to
能
perceive
人处字啊，
what
这个
the
还要
grown-ups
能这
can't,
个
for
辨别
example,
就是
ghosts
各
and
种味道啊，
spirits.
就是就
And
种
then
种
on
情
top
况
of
不
that,
同，所
there
以
are
这
lots
个
of
呢，我
people
们要
with
知道是
very
我们
special
的这个
functions
四
with
大
their
呢，就
other
是如果没有
sensations,
参过，就
such
是
as
不亲近的这样
recognizing
的四大，
words
没
through
有
their
这个
textile
就是
sensations, as
就
well
加
as
和我们的
tasting
控制我们
different
的
flavors
这个
through textile
就是觉性
sensations,
的话
and
呢，
so
就
on
是
and
实
so
际上觉
forth.
性它自己的
The
功
four
能上
great
面呢，
elements,
完全
if
都
it
是
is
可
not
以的，就是就
entangled
像我们这个水呢，
and
就是它如果自然放起的话呢，里面什么样的
involved
这个
with
被荒蓝的，
our
就是各种这个影
awareness
响呢，就是可以呈现的。但是因为
and
它有
blocking
一
our
种这个
awareness,
混合
the
的这个
awareness
浑浊物，
itself
就是这
would
样
be
原因
able
的话呢，
to
就是
be all
各种影
pervasive.
响呢，就是里面是不能
Just
这
like
个
water,
呈现
if the
的，
water
所以
is
它自
really
己的功
clear,
能
then
呢，
it
就是
would
没
be
有如
able
实的这个
to
发挥出来。就是原因呢，就是有这
reflect
个
the
其他的一
image
些这个
of
外缘。
whatever
有时候
colors
这
and
个道理
whatever
呢，我
things
觉得
that's
还是很
within.
重要。就是
But
有时候我们
since
觉得
it
呢，
is now
好像这个
turbid
如
with
来
the
藏呢，就
mixture
是每
of
个众生都
dusts,
是记住的，而
then
且如
the
来藏的
images
功德的
cannot
话呢，
appear
什么都
anymore.
可以将来这
So
个
the
可以
actual
出现的。
functions
但
of
是
the
呢，为什么
water
是我们
or
还
the
是有
actual
那么
functions
多的
of
这个
awareness
局限性呢？
cannot
就是局限性
be
的原因的
manifested.
话呢，就是在这里也是
On
是
top
讲
of
得
that,
很
there
清
are other
楚的。为什么
conditions,
有些人这
other
个通
external
过精进
conditions.
入你的
I
修
think
行呢，这个
sometimes
确
through
确实实
this
已经得到了
particular
这个
teaching,
超
we
凡入
should be
圣的
able
这
to
种境界
recognize
啊。
that Buddha
这个是
nature
为什
is
么呢？就是有些人得
innate
到，有些
in
人
every
得不到
sentient
的话
being,
呢，
and
我觉得有
the
些人
merit
对
of
这个
Buddha
修
nature
行
can
的这个
manifest
信呢，就是特别
for
的
every
迫
single
切
one.
啊，就是
People may
特
ask
别的迫切
questions
的话
why
呢，那么
someone
就是
would
依
be
靠
able
他的
to
这个信的
attain
能量呢，就是
realization and
然
some
而就是
can't.
外在的很多障碍
I
呢，就是
think
自然
it
而
is
然就是
maybe
破除
because
啊，
of
就是
the
破除。
eagerness
有些人呢，
of
虽然表
engaging
面
in
上呢
practice,
就是是有一
and
些，
by
但是
relying
呢，
on the
也许
power
是
of
有
the
这
mind,
个
the
前世的各种这个障碍。
obscurations would
也许的
naturally
话
be
呢，就是自
conquered
己的这
and
个修行的力量
eradicated.
呢，就是
Some, though,
薄弱
appear
啊，
to be
就是也有这
practicing,
个
but
种种
maybe
原因。
because
所
of
以我
their
们讲到这个
previous
能源经济学的话呢，可
obscurations,
能确实知
the
道这
karmic
个有时候呢，
obscurations,
好
or
像是我
maybe
们的这
because
个
of
心
the
是无常的，
weak
有时候心
power
识的本
of
体呢，也
engaging in
是光
practice.
明
For
的、无
various
为法的。
reasons,
但
they
这
would
两
not
个
be
是
able to
到底
do
是
so.
怎么这个分析？有时候我们的这个身体呢，好像是
Sometimes
对心
we
理
feel
起到
that
这个
the
直接的
mind
作用。
is
有时候的话呢，
impermanent.
好像
Sometimes
是
we
它也没什么关
see
系，就
the
是有这么
nature
一
of
个
the
特
mind
别
is the
就是复
luminous,
杂的
the
这个道理呢，就
unconditioned
经
Dharma.
常就是
But how
就
could
疏忽
both
的
of
话呢，
them be
就是
manifesting?
实际上
And
这次我们
how
学了以
does
后的
the
话呢，就是
body
确实佛陀是
work,
怎么讲，就是
whether
通过有一
directly
种
or indirectly
推
to the
理例证
mind?
的方式来，就是
We would get quite
让我们
confused
就是
with that.
进一步的了
And
解，就是这个
such
你
kind kinds of complex teachings could bind us and fetter us. But this time, after studying Shurangama Sutra, through the Buddha's analysis, his logical inference helps us to understand the actual theory of seeing the nature of the mind. He did not just give an example to ask us to believe his example. He didn't do that. Rather, he gives the detailed and layer by layer inference and analysis to help us to make such observation, so that each one of us have the possibility to enter into this profound debate and profound conversation, which would be extremely meaningful. This particular type of observation is very different than the other sutras had presented. Each one of us can make the same observation, and to make the observation of the connection of our body and mind, or the four great elements with our mind. We can all do that. Throughout our own observation and analysis, sometimes we would be able to see the clear, bright sun after the clouds has dispersed, after the confusion has dispersed. Though sometimes we would still be feeling quite confused and feel that we are lost in fogs, but that is truly normal. Look at Ananda. He is such a wonderful practitioner and such a marvelous noble one, but he would weep when he feels wronged and feel that he's quite confused and don't understand. For all of us, we're just mundane beings being wandering in samsara with great negative karmic debt. It's just normal for us not to be able to understand. Why do we not see our true mind? It is because the four great elements that is entangled with our mind, and then it becomes a falseness. Such kinds of false perceptions are falsity at the beginning anyways. But the mundane beings grasp on it and hold it as true. At the time when we studied Madhyamika, we studied the conventional truth. What is conventional truth? It is falsity as well. It is simply perceived as true by the mundane beings. When we studied entering the way of Madhyamika at the time of studying the ultimate truth and conventional truth, the ultimate truth is the truth that's perceived by the noble ones, therefore they're all true. And in terms of conventional truth, they're simply true to the ignorant mundane beings. They are simply also falsity. So this is the turbidity of view. As you can see that in terms of view, there's the right view and some of them are wrong view. Some may seem to be right view, but in fact also are wrong views, such as the wrong views, such as taking what is impermanent as permanent and what is not blissful as blissful, taking what does not have any self-existence as there's an intrinsically existent self, and what is not pure as pure. Now, as long as there is a view, there is a subject to it. And if we were to understand the view from the Buddhist logic perspective, there is the view developed through inference and a view developed through direct cognition, which, comparatively speaking, would be the valid cognition. However, if we were to compare such kind of a view developed through inference and direct cognition to that of the cognition of the noble ones, those are still the not valid cognition. That is why it is called the turbidity of view, because the mundane beings would hold on to those as true. And then the next one talks about the turbidity of affliction. Further, the function of memory, discrimination, and verbal comprehension in your mind, bringing into being knowledge and views. From out of them appears the six defiling objects. Apart from the defiling objects, there are no appearances. Apart from the cognition, they have no nature, but they have entangled in a falseness. This is the third layer called the turbidity of affliction. Now the Buddha addressed the question to Ananda. In some ways, we can see that the Buddha is currently giving the teaching just as if he is magically displaying that teaching to us. The Buddha, within the 49 years, had given such a grand numbers of teachings, not just the Shurangama Sutra. Sometimes there are people, one author would only be able to compose one book in their whole life. life. But the Buddha gave such wonderful teachings, multiple teachings in his whole life. And I am talking about those teachings given by the Buddha and that is still existent in the human realm and have not included the ones in the celestial realm and the Naga's palace. It feels that the Buddha has been replying the Ananda's questions for such a long period of time. In fact, if we were to engage in the actual studies of the sutras taught by the Buddha, we would be able to discover lots of profound meanings. I think all of us can be considered are considered extremely fortunate and endowed with great merit, because in the past few years we've studied lots of sutras such as the Malakirti Sutra, the Lotus Sutra, the Vajrachitika, the Diamond Sutra, and the Sutra of the Medicine Buddha, and the Prajna Paramita, condensed verses of the Prajna Paramita. So over here we can see that the Buddha is giving the teachings to Ananda in such a profound way where the Buddha explains it layer by layer. Previously, the Buddha talked about the turbidity of view, and now the Buddha started talking about the turbidity of affliction. And then he first talks about the dualistic thoughts, the function of memory, which refers to the grasping onto the conceptual thoughts. Discrimination refers to the current grasping to dualistic thoughts. And then the verbal comprehension, the verbal refers to discussions and so on. And comprehension refers to study, which is something related to the future. And according to some commentary, this represents the past, present, and the future. Now, when we talk about the sixth consciousness, that which makes the discrimination, from out of them appears the six defiling objects. The sixth consciousness, the nature of which is making discernment, brings into being knowledge and views. The future, the past, and all of those kinds of discernment from your view. It has such kinds of a function, which is to bring into being of knowledge and views. And then from that, out of those appears the six defiling objects. Let it be of the past, present, and future. Your view and your dualistic thoughts, out of the previously stated interventions or the effects of them, the view and knowledge would manifest and or would bring into being into the six defiling objects, or the six kinds of objects, six defilement, six dust, which all refers to the form, sound, smell, taste, and textile feelings. Over here, it points to the skandha of perception, which has a variety of appearances. When it comes to making judgments, analysis, or discernments, all of those are very much based on knowledge and views. And then these knowledge and views would bring into being of the six defiling objects. If the six defiling objects, if the sixth consciousness were to part from the six objects, that is to say, if there is no form, sound, touch, smell, and taste, then there is no characteristics of the subject, that is mind consciousness. Apart from the defiling objects, there are no appearances. That is to say, on the other hand, if there is no sixth consciousness, the eye, ear, nose, tongue, body, and consciousness, the six consciousnesses, if there is no such six consciousnesses, which means there is no subject, then how could there be object? So it means that if there is no subject, then obviously there is no object to be perceived, and vice versa. However, in the appearance, in the conventional appearance, there is the object as well as the subject, which is the mind consciousness that's being entangled together, intertwined into this falseness. So our afflictions are like such as well. We know that at the time of generating greed or grasping, it is because that we generated this mind of grasping because there is an object for us to grasp onto. If there is no object, then there is no grasping mind that can be generated either. Similarly, if there is no grasping mind, then how could there be an object that is desirable? At the time that there is no true existence, it is simply a false appearance. It is the false dualistic thoughts that naturally forms it, which is the third layer of turbidity, that is the turbidity of afflictions. And the skandha that it corresponds to is the skandha of perception. According to the sutra, it says that all of the oceans of karmic obscurations derived from the false illusions. The Buddha tells Ananda over here, says that your sixth consciousness discerns. There are all kinds of objects and consciousness, though it appears to be existent and manifesting. However, they're simply manifesting delusions, and that is called the turbidity of afflictions. Usually, when we talk about the turbidity of view, there is the view of permanence, of nihilistic view, and the wrong views. But in terms of the turbidity of affliction, we are talking about greed, anger, ignorance. Those are the most coarse and most harsh afflictions. There is no true existence to object or the mind. There is no true nature to the discern mind of the past, future, and the present. There is no such existence. At the time that it is not existent, it is intertwined with our dualistic thoughts, which then forms affliction. So that's the third one. Now let's look at the fourth. And then day and night there is endless productions and extinctions as your knowledge and views continually wish to remain in the world, while your karmic patterns constantly move you to various places. This entanglement becomes a falseness, which is the fourth layer called the turbidity of living beings. Over here it says that throughout the day, throughout the nights, your dualistic thoughts, your false thoughts, kept on having productions and extinctions without cessation, just like the waves of ocean that is unstopping. The false mind that we have kept on having productions, and there is no stopping to it, just like the ocean waves. All of these knowledge and views, every time we have those thoughts, continuously to wish to remain in the world. For example, the view of the existent self kept on wanting to remain. We kept on thinking that my view, my point of view, my perspective, my life, my value, we kept on wanting to keep that in this world. And then with those kinds of wish to remain the view in this world, while your karmic patterns constantly move you to various places. Though that you have the wish to continue or to maintain those views, there is the powerful karmic force that pushes you to different places. There are people who wish to nurture this body so that they can abide in this world forever and ever. Or maybe nurture this body with all kinds of nutrition so that they can remain in this world as whatever they are or however state they're in now. Or those people wish to abide in Larungar and never move to other places. Some said that I would like to die in Larungar. It would be wonderful if I can die here. You may speak of it now, maybe that's your wish, but it's not necessarily visible for you because of our different karma, because the force of karma, the wind of karma can blow you to any places. Over here, the turbidity of living beings is combined with the teaching of the skandha formation. Our dualistic thoughts, the production and the extinctions of dualistic thoughts, when it comes to each of the sentient beings, they would hold on to those views and knowledge and their dualistic thoughts. So those kinds of knowledge and view really want to abide in this world. But the power of karma is so strong that we can't be truly free. Sometimes we really wish that we can be a good practitioner, but because of our karma, we would have lots of afflictions, and sometimes there are people who wish to live a little bit longer or stay at a certain place for a little bit longer, or seek for wealth, happiness, beauty, or longevity, or those kinds of happiness, worldly happiness. But all of those are simply bubbles in front of the power of the karma. There's really nothing that they can do when facing the power of their karmic retributions. I once knew a Buddhist practitioner who wishes to attain rainbow body at the time of death, but when I heard about his death, he didn't attain the rainbow body. Rather, his corpse was quite large, and nothing really happened to nothing. His wish was not accomplished. So we can see that our wishes most likely will not coincide with the reality. So our view and our knowledge will be entangled with the previous karmic force, as well as the current causes and conditions. In this way, because of the entanglement, things would change. Though sometimes we have lots of good wishes and good plans, but there could be impermanence and changes. I usually make plans at the very beginning of the year, but because of the different changes throughout the year, there could be the unfinished plans. It's good to still make plans. It's good to make a plan for a day, for a month, for a year, for a whole life. But you need to understand that the plans that you make sometimes won't be able to come to actualization. Our thoughts, our knowledge and view may have gaps to our karmic connections. So this is called the turbidity of sentient beings. I believe the sentient beings are quite pitiful. Some may have really good wishes, but won't be able to have those wishes fulfilled. Compared to the sentient beings, I believe living here, all of us are doing quite well. At least we have all the provisions we need. We just need some food and drinks to support our life, which is great. We have tsampa and ghee, then that's enough. But compared to the worldly beings, where they need to pay for the mortgage of the house and mortgage of the car, and so on and so forth, if they were to have debt from the banks or from other places, then they would be called upon from those different departments by the banks and by other people. On top of that, because of the pandemic, there are workers whom being stranded because of the pandemic, and then they would have to stay at one place under lockdown, and then they would have to pay for the rent where they already don't have money. On top of that, the quarantine nowadays, at many places you need to pay for the fee for quarantine. It's more comfortable to be quarantined at a hotel, but maybe some of the hotels could be cheaper and some could be more expensive. Usually it's more expensive than the other quarantine places, but some of the workers don't have the money to pay for that, and they would suffer a lot. Because of the different causes and conditions of the sentient beings varies. There are very few practitioners whom don't have to worry about their livelihood. And in this day and time, that is considered already something to be happy about. When we look at the changes of this world, our life could very much have many changes in the future because of our karma and because of the differences of our merits. Just look at the people around you. Some people may be very cultured and very talented and did quite well when they were young, but slowly their life may take a turn of very unexpected impermanence or unexpected changes. Those were taught quite extensively in the words of my perfect teacher in the guiding meditation parts when it talks about the impermanence. So sometimes I do see that there are people whose first half of life and the second half of life are quite different because of unexpected changes. And those are very much because of the different karmic conditions. And because of that, it is called the turbidity of sentient beings, especially I think after the pandemic. I deeply feel that the sentient beings are suffering a lot. Now the fifth one, originally your seeing and hearing were not different natures, but a multitude of defiling objects has divided them until suddenly they became different. Their nature have a mutual awareness, but their functions are in opposition. Sameness and difference arises, and they lose their identity. This entanglement becomes a falseness, which is the fifth layer called the turbidity of lifespan. Now, this one corresponds to this turbidity of lifespan corresponds to the skandha of consciousness. The Buddha now tells Ananda that the seeing and hearing, as well as the sensations, they are initially not different natures. The eight consciousness is the main topic over here. The Buddha points out that the seeing, hearing, and the sensations do not have any characteristics within the awareness of Tathagata. However, because of the defilements, all of the previously stated graspings, for example, we would hold on to the forms as seeing and the sounds as hearing. Such kinds of divisions between all of them lead to the differentiations of them. However, their nature have a mutual awareness. Within the nature of them, within the nature of Tathagata, there is no divisions of all of those. But in the conventional sense, in the conventional appearance, in the wondrous manifestations, there are the clear distinctions and differentiations. That is to say that your taste is not the hearing and your seeing is not the tasting, and so on and so forth. In such a way, the sameness and the difference, such kinds of reference for sameness and difference has already been lost. To further explain, it is to say that the concept of sameness and difference would be lost when the dualistic thoughts of the sentient beings get intervened. That's very similar to at the state of dreaming. When we dream, the six consciousnesses are shut down. There is only the delusion, the delusory consciousness that is quite active. In that kind of delusory state, all of those sensations that we have in the dream, for example, at the time of dreaming, your eyes are shut, but you can still see, and that is because in that kind of delusory sensations, a delusory consciousness, it could see, could hear, could touch, and could taste, so on and so forth. For the sentient beings, within our true nature, there is no such kinds of delusory falseness. But after the delusory falseness, there is the loss of reference, of sameness and difference. The Chinese doctors, the Chinese traditional medicine, at the time of checking your pulse or looking at the signs on your tongue, they would be able to have a clear view of your whole body's health situation. And then they would be able to help out to adjust your body from a sub-health state to a better state. But the Western medicine doesn't really do that. They would only diagnose the portions of body. For example, the doctors that looks at eyes, they would only do that throughout their whole life, or the ears or tongue or body and nose. They would only study that part of the body, but do not put the whole body as, do not diagnose the whole body as a whole, rather quite fragmented. Similar to the Western doctors, we have the division of the 5 aggregates and the 6 roots, where initially they are similar and they are without obscurations. Since the sameness and difference arise and lose their identities, this entanglement becomes a falseness, which then is the 5th layer, that is the turbidity of lifespan. This turbidity of lifespan, usually we would talk about the shortness of the lifespan of sentient beings, but over here, the turbidity of lifespan refers to the false characteristics or false, rather, appearances out of the entanglements of the sentient beings, seeing, hearing, and sensations, and along with the ignorance. This part, the next part, is a summary, which is considered as one of the most important parts in the Shurangama Sutra. Over here, the Buddha says that, Ananda, you now want to cause your seeing, hearing, sensation, and cognition to return to and tally with the permanence, bliss, true self, and purity of the thus come one. So the Buddha told Ananda, now I've already concluded the teaching of the 5 turbidities. The seeing, hearing, sensation, and cognition should be in line with the thus come one's permanence, bliss, the true self, and purity. Means all of the dualistic thoughts at this moment that's being brought about by the 6 consciousnesses should be unified with the wisdom of the permanence, bliss, true self, and purity of the thus come one. If you can recognize that all of the dualistic thoughts are no other than the awareness and wisdom of the thus come one, then this is what we would call as a great perfection. That is what we've studied in the treasury of Dharma Dhatu. Whatever you see at this moment, your dualistic thoughts, whatever you see, hear, taste, whatever you feel, those are no other than the non-dual wisdom of the thus come one. You should be able to see the nature of mind. This is the pointing out of the Buddha to Ananda. He said that you should bring your seeing, hearing, sensation, and cognition into the thus come one's permanence, bliss, the true self, and purity, into this state of wisdom. What you should do now is that you should first decide that what the basis of birth and death is by relying on the perfect tranquil nature, which is neither produced nor extinguished. The Buddha states that you need to see the basis of samsara first, the impure mind consciousness and the mind consciousness that has production and extinction. You need to see it. In the Mahāti, we call it the distinguishing of the existence and the tranquil or nirvana. At the time of recognizing the different speech and dualistic thoughts of the six realm beings, as well as their postures that's related to the physical body, and recognize that all of those are no other than the wondrous manifestation of the thus come one's nature. There are no other than the body, speech, and mind of the thus come one's wondrous manifestation. At the time of recognizing this, at the time of developing such insight, then you, compared to that, the Buddha says that you should now come to the conclusion of the basis of birth and death and samsara. If you can rely on that which is without extinction and without production, let it be recognizing it or come to certainty of it by your practice or through your practice, then you should be able to attain such mind that is without production and without extinction, or finding that which is without production and without extinction. So by recognizing it and abide in the realization of it, that is the realization, that is the seeking for the realization without production, without extinction, with the mind that is without production and without extinction. This is extremely important. By means of this tranquil, turn the empty and false production and extinction, so that they are subdued and return to the source of enlightenment. The attainment of this source is bright enlightenment, which is neither produced nor extinguished, is the mind on the causal ground. Then you can completely accomplish the cultivation and certification of the ground fruition. It means that at the time of meditating, if you can truly abide in the nature of mind, you will understand that it is the mind that is without production and without cessation. This is easy to understand for those of you who have some insights of it. That is the nature, the true nature of mind. It doesn't have birth or death. At the beginning, it may seem to enter into this mind with the method of having birth and death. However, it is with the method of having birth and death to recognize the mind that is without birth and without death. At the time of causal ground, we can definitely practice in such way. This is why it's called the mind of causal ground. Throughout meditating, you should understand, if you can constantly practice in that state of without birth and without cessation, it will naturally manifest. It will naturally appear. At the time of attaining the true fruition of Buddhahood, it is simply seeing it, and that's it. Other than that, there's nothing else. So at the very beginning, how can we attain this without death and without birth, and with death and with birth? It is quite, how can we enter into that state of without death and without birth? With the method of with birth and with death, it could be a little bit difficult, but when we truly abide, though it seems to be with birth and with death, but as long as we're abiding in the true nature of mind during meditation, it is really of no difference than space. If we can continuously to practice in such a way, then this nature of mind, which is no other than the space itself, would truly manifest and completely appear, and you would be able to perceive it, and that is called attaining enlightenment. This is the key to understand. And then in the sutra it says that it is like purifying muddy water by placing it in a quiet vessel which is kept completely still and unmoving. The sand and silt settle, then the pure water would appear. This is called the initial subduing of the guest dust affliction. At the time of all of the silt and sand settles within this quiet vessel without any movements, this is called the initial subduing of the guest dust affliction, or another word is calm abiding, the shamatha practice. During the practice, we need to first make sure that our mind is capable. This has been placed of great importance by the Chinese Buddhism schools, the Chan Buddhism school, as well as the Tibetan Buddhism schools. You have to calm down your mind. Let's not talk about the vipassana. Let's just talk about shamatha. At the time of practicing shamatha, your mind needs to be calmed down. There are the 9 ways of abiding and the various ways of making observation that would call back your dualistic thoughts, to call back your dualistic thoughts again and again, and abide again and again. Usually we should be able to abide for half an hour, for an hour or two. At that time, many people would feel that, oh, I'm quite successful in the practice of peaceful abiding. But that's really nothing to be too proud of, because 1 or 2 hours is really nothing. It is simply natural how the water would naturally purify itself, because the silt of affliction would simply sink to the bottom. This is the very beginning of differentiating or to separate from the afflictions. That is why I kept on emphasizing on the importance of practice, especially to the classes that engages in practice. If you do not practice, then after a period of time you would have more and more severe afflictions. Don't even talk about taming the afflictions. You probably activated the afflictions. In such a way, how would you even call yourself as the practitioners? If you can practice a little bit every day, then you would definitely be quite different than those who don't. I remember my experience at the World Youth Buddhist Symposium where and when it was held in Thailand, the Theravada practitioners really enjoyed practice meditation, so they don't move at all. They're motionless, but the one sitting on my right is someone who didn't really practice, so he kept on moving. I was sitting in the middle, and it seems that there's a gradation from the movements and to non-movements. I'm simply speaking of the truth that in terms of meditation, I believe we are not that great at it. If we were to practice for a long period of time, we would definitely be able to develop insights, just as how the water placed for a long period of time would naturally be clear. Our mind would naturally be clear if we were to sit to practice formal meditation practice. Then the Buddha says that the complete removal of the mud from the water is called the eternal severance of fundamental ignorance.
这个是应该是深广的这种
This
智慧。
is the
那么那
description
个
of
时
the
候呢，这个
wisdom
冥
of
想
Vipassana.
静
When clarity
冥
is
想
pure
进
to
程
its essence,
一切变
then
现
no
不
matter
为
what
烦恼
happens, there is
结
no
合
affliction.
涅槃清净
Everything
妙
is
等
in
等。
accord
那么最
with the
后就是我
pure
们这个
and
深
wonderful
广智慧
virtues
修得
of
很好的
nirvana.
话呢，
At the
那
time
就是
of
这个
being
我们的这种这个明觉
advanced
这个如来藏的
in
本性
the
就是
Vipassana
最这
practice,
个精明的这种
then
境界的
the
话呢，就是
pure
完全就是
enlightened
现前
Buddha
就是特别
nature,
纯洁的这个现
the
象。
most
那么这个时候
pure
呢，就是一切变化都是
insight
不会
would
被烦恼
manifest,
断的，你做也好，做
would
就是什么
naturally appear.
就心中
Such
做
pure
也
and
好，
wonderful
看起来是
virtues of
唱歌跳舞也
nirvana
好，
would
任何的
naturally
行为，
appear.
任
Then
何的举
whatever
动
kinds
的
of
话呢，
actions
都
that
不
you
会
would
被烦
carry
恼
out
就是所断的。
would
那
not
那个
be
时候呢，就
turned
应该
by
是这个清净涅
afflictions.
槃妙的
Walking,
这个动作呢，
sitting,
就是结合
dancing,
就是现
singing,
前的
any kinds of
就那个
actions
时候
would
真正
not
是已
be
经
turned
成
by
就了，真正是
afflictions.
已经
And that
获
is
得了就是
the
最深的
time
这种
when
果位，所以
the
包括这个长睡自
when
睡的
one
话
would
呢，它这里
attain the
就
most
是讲就是
supreme
真觉呢，
fruition.
就是入睡，
According
就是
to
如清净的
Master
水一样。然后
Zixuan,
见闻
he
呢，
says
就是入
that
座，
the
见和问的
true
话呢，就是像座一样
enlightenment
的。
is
然后
just like
定神
water,
就是
like
入
pure
静气，
water,
就意思
and
是
seeing
这
and
个真
hearing
觉呢，
is
就是
just
像睡
like
一
the
样的。
turbidity.
见闻呢，就是
If
跟刚才
one
的这个
can
浑浊一样的。然后我们这个身体呢，就是
such
禅定
as
的话呢，
the
就像静气一样，
quiet
就是所以
vase
通过这种修行的话呢，
through such
先
kind
这
of
个压制烦恼，
practice
就先前记着，
would
然
be
后进一
able
步的认
to
识这个烦恼的本性的话呢，
subdue the
那么这是这个
afflictions
圣
and
观的修法，
manifest
就是
the
最后呢
wonderful
更出
virtues
这
of
个
nirvana.
无明呢，就是先
This
前如来的
is
这
the
个功德。
practice
那么这方
of
面呢，就是大家也是应该
Vipassana
尽量的
that
这个
would
努
be
力
able
修
to
行，非常
uproot
重要。
ignorance
今天
and
就是
manifest all kinds of
我们讲到
virtues.
这里。
We should try our best to practice. This is quite crucial. We should stop here today.